Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is TVP World. You're watching World News Tonight. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. Tragic news from Poland. 2 more flood victims have been confirmed, bringing the total death toll to 9. The Polish government held a special session today to discuss aid for flood victims. More on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Hezbollah leader killed in massive Israeli strike on Beirut. Netherlands retires F-16s, sends jets to Ukraine. Hope for political prisoners in Belarus. Poland's foreign minister weighs in. Polish police have found the remains of 2 more flood victims in southwestern Poland, raising the death toll to 9. Those affected by the floods have begun comprehensive investigations into the extent of the damage.
Over the course of the floods, Polish police, military and firefighters have done their absolute best to assist wherever possible. Tens of thousands of determined men and women braved the waters to help keep the levees strong and evacuate those trapped in their homes. However, despite their best efforts, they couldn't reach everyone in time.
As of now, the flood death toll is 9 people. We discovered 2 more victims. I would rather not talk about the corpses just yet, as they are yet to be identified. After the identification process, we'll know who these people were. One other person is also still missing.
While the water may seem calm now, one should not forget the devastation it caused during its culmination waves. As of the latest tallies done by the government in Warsaw, the damage has already exceeded some of the most pessimistic estimates, and officials aren't done counting yet.
We now know that over 17,000 apartments and homes, almost 8,500 outbuildings, almost 1,150 public buildings, including 141 schools, 41 bridges, 45 sewage pumps, 121 roads, 31 sports centers, 25 sewage treatment plants, and 67 kindergartens and nurseries were damaged or destroyed.
The Polish government is expecting to approve a new bill early next week meant to provide further help and funds to the victims of the flood, and also compensate those who helped their flooded compatriots out of the kindness of their hearts. If there are no amendments, the bill will be on the president's desk by Thursday. With the brunt of the flood already behind them, all that is left for those affected is to pick up the pieces and move forward.
Russia has once again targeted Ukrainian civilians in its latest attacks. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military has reported another successful strike on a key Russian commander. Russia's neighbor, meanwhile, are calling for increased deterrence along NATO's eastern flank.
At least 9 people have died in the wake of a Russian double-tap attack on a hospital in the Ukrainian border town of Sumy. To make matters worse, while the patients and medical staff were being evacuated, the Russians hit the site with another missile. The double tap is a typical Russian strategy used to maximize civilian casualties.
It was an attack by a Shahed drone. The state emergency service immediately started the evacuation. Unfortunately, 20 or 30 minutes later, there was another explosion.
Everyone in the world who speaks about this war must pay attention to what Russia is targeting. They are waging war on hospitals, civilian objects and people's lives. Only strength can force Russia into peace. Peace through strength is the only right way. I thank everyone who supports us on this path.
The attack on Sumy is not the only strike against civilians that Russia has recently carried out. Moscow's forces have also shelled several areas in southeastern Ukraine, with Ukrainian authorities reporting the deaths of 4 people on Saturday in the Kherson and Donetsk regions. The Russian invasion remains a direct threat to NATO member states bordering Russia. Poland and the Baltic states are collectively demanding more funding for anti-air defenses along the borders. Stray Russian drones are currently their most pressing concern.
Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia and Poland are working to secure additional EU funding to strengthen the defense of the EU-NATO eastern border. Defense ministers met in Daugavpils today to emphasize the need for a NATO and EU focus on our joint counter-mobility initiative.
Despite these numerous assaults, Ukrainian authorities have reported some successes. Ukrainian intelligence has allegedly assassinated a Russian colonel responsible for training drone operators in Moscow. As the fighting remains tense, the Ukrainians want to show support for their valiant soldiers. To do so, they organized a march under the Honor the Heroes banner.
The Netherlands has retired its fleet of F-16 fighter jets, replacing them with F-35s. Now, some of the F-16s will now be handed over to Ukraine to bolster its air defense capabilities.
The Dutch Air Force has officially retired the F-16 fighter jet. The final demonstration flight took place on Friday before the entire fleet is replaced by the more modern F-35. But retired doesn't mean scrapped. 24 of the Dutch F-16s will make their way to Ukraine, where they are very welcome. Ukraine has already received the first batch of the fighters in the beginning of August. Ukrainian pilots will be trained in Romania.
Now is a new stage in the development of the Ukrainian Air Force. We have done a lot to ensure that the Ukrainian Air Force has moved to a new standard of aviation, to Western combat aviation.
The F-16 fighter jet has been in use for over 45 years. Despite its age, the F-16 could be particularly useful to Ukraine compared to its Soviet-produced counterparts, due to the maneuverability and detection range of the machine. Nicknamed the Flying Razor Blade by Dutch pilots, the aircraft is very capable of shooting down missiles, bombers and even small drones. It has a good track record in active combat, even besting the on-paper more powerful MiG-29s. During the 1998-1999 Kosovo War, a Dutch F-16 managed to shoot down a Serbian MiG-29. Eric Vriesen, a long-time defense correspondent for the Dutch weekly EW magazine, told TVP World.
Which is quite a rare happening in the warfare of the last decades, shooting down a Russian-built MiG-29. And I think it has made the F-16 like an iconic plane.
Analysts doubt, however, whether the F-16 will see much dogfighting against its Russian counterparts. Its use will mostly lie in other areas where it has proven itself in conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, supporting ground troops and shooting down missiles and drones.
It has a superior sensors, so it can give information and also is quite useful in defending airspace.
What the F-16 lacks, though, are stealth capabilities and the connected warfare that the F-35 provides. Countries including Poland are expected to be able to supply Ukraine with more F-16s once the new generation fighters have been delivered. Ukraine has already lost at least one F-16 in combat, although the direct cause has not been revealed by the Ukrainian military. Still, Ukraine's leadership has been positive about the ability of the F-16s to help fend off Russian missile and drone strikes.
The Washington Post estimates that winter could significantly impact Ukrainians' attitudes towards the war. Residents, wary from the conflict that has lasted almost 2.5 years, are reportedly willing to consider concessions, according to a survey by the Kyiv International Institute of Sociology. We now go live to our correspondent in Ukraine, Oz Chatterjee, for more on the situation. Hello, Oz. What can you tell us about the mood in Ukraine concerning the war?
Well, the energy issue is a big one going forward, and Zelensky brought it up himself when he was visiting the United States, saying that Russia has destroyed all thermal power plants in Ukraine and has destroyed nearly all of Ukraine's hydroelectric capacity. So Ukraine really is struggling at the moment. There have been also recent attacks, and the attacks from Russia on Ukraine's energy grid are ongoing, with attacks on 3 different energy transmission facilities within the last 72 hours. That's according to the Ukrainian Prime Minister, Denis Shmyhal. And now Shmyhal was visiting an area in Mykolaiv where they're planning to build some more generation facilities to try and bring those online before that bitter winter period. They're planning 5 distributed energy generation facilities there. That's probably not going to be enough to supply Ukraine's needs through the winter if these ongoing attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure continue by Russia, and there's every reason to expect them to continue. So the moods are obviously going to be very bitter about that here. But it should be said that that's poll cited in the Washington Post still only puts the number of concessions at a relatively low number in the mid-30s of the population willing to consider those concessions. Now, that is up from the last time that they did ask that question in a significant way. So that is should be remarked on. But the idea that the Ukrainians are willing to give up at this point because of a bitter winter is not borne out by the reality. What is borne out by the reality is it is going to be a bitter winter. Ukraine still lacks the energy facilities and capabilities that it needs, and the government needs to do more to bring more online if the Ukrainians are going to get through the winter okay.
Thank you so much for the update, Oz, and please do stay safe out there. Appreciate it. Hezbollah has confirmed on Saturday that its leader, Saeed Hassan Nasrallah, has been killed. Now, this comes after the Israeli military launched a massive attack on Beirut on Friday. The assault left dozens wounded and several dead. Lebanese authorities reported that the explosions created a crater approximately 20 meters deep. The Israeli army continued shelling the area through the night and into Saturday.
It is these heavy strikes on Hezbollah's underground headquarters from last evening that Israel claims had killed Nasrallah. Israeli media quickly reported that the leader of the Shiite group, designated as a terrorist organization in 1997, along with other high-ranking members, might be under the rubble. Around midnight, the IDF announced that more strikes were imminent.
When entering and descending to the parking level, there is a storage facility for strategic weapons. Hezbollah has stored these strategic weapons beneath civilian populations. In a short time, we will attack the weapons stored beneath the buildings. The explosion, because of the missiles, may damage the structure and could potentially cause them to collapse.
As night fell, the skies over Beirut glowed red from the bombardment. By morning, the IDF announced that Nasrallah had been killed in the initial strikes. And later this afternoon, Hezbollah confirmed his death, which landed heavy on the hearts of his supporters.
The killing of Hassan Nasrallah is because he is beside the Palestinians. He was making things for Palestine. The attack is against Palestine. Unfortunately, the Arab countries are doing nothing against what is happening in Gaza and Lebanon.
In Israel, his death has left a much different impression.
I think Israel did a fantastic job. Killing Nasrallah will bring peace, prosperity, and freedom back to the north. And one day, inshallah, we will free Lebanon and bring safety back to the Lebanese people.
With Nasrallah out of the way and Hamas's top leader Ismail Haniyeh assassinated earlier this summer in Tehran, all eyes are on Iran's supreme leader Sayyid Ali Hosseini Khamenei. Reports say that following yesterday's attack, he has been moved to a secure location.
This is not the end of the toolbox. It should be very clear there are more tools we can use ahead. The message is a simple one. Whoever threatens the citizens of the State of Israel, we will know how to get there, in the north, in the south, even in more distant places.
We asked a Middle East expert from the Jagiellonian University here in Poland on the potential of such an attack.
I don't think Israel will hit Iran directly or try to eliminate the leadership of Iran. There's something there's a huge difference between killing the leaders of organization, even terrorist organization, and to eliminate the foreign state dignitaries.
In response to the latest escalations, the Polish Army's 150 troops stationed in the US peacekeeping force in the region will not be evacuated, but they have been put on high alert status.
Is the release of political prisoners in Belarus possible? Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski suggests that it could be following his visit to the United States for the UN General Assembly.
In a video summarizing his visit, Sikorski said that he met with U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs.
This is very important in the context of imprisoned Belarusian oppositionists, including Andrzej Poczobut.
According to political scientist Alexandr Papko, about 25 people are supposedly being detained every day in Belarus under the suspicion of activity against the state.
Repressive Lukashenko regime does not want people to repeat the mass protests which broke out in 2020.
According to experts, journalists and ethnic minority groups are particularly repressed. Andrzej Poczobut, a Polish-Belarusian correspondent, was arrested in 2023.
He was sentenced for 8 years of prison, and now he's in prison in very hard conditions, as every political prisoner in Belarus.
Poczobut was not included in the swap of 21 prisoners between Russia, Belarus and the US in August this year. According to reports by Freedom House, more than 1,400 political prisoners are still being held by Minsk.
Pope Francis faced sharp criticism over the sexual abuse scandals involving the Catholic Church during his visit to Belgium. The country has received more than 700 complaints of clergy abuse since 2012, and in March, the Pope expelled the former Belgian bishop from the priesthood after he admitted to committing abuse.
On Friday, during a welcome speech to Pope Francis, Belgium's Prime Minister and King criticized the Catholic Church for the instances of clergy abuse of children. In response, the Pope acknowledged the Church's guilt and agreed that preventing future abuse is vital.
The Church must be ashamed and ask for forgiveness and try to resolve the situation with Christian humility and put in place all the things, all the resources so that this doesn't happen again.
Later in the day, Pope Francis met behind closed doors with a group of sexual abuse victims who asked for better compensation.
We asked for an increase in compensation for the victims. We didn't talk about the amount as such, but we all agreed that what has been obtained for the moment is totally inadequate.
Since 2010, over 500 Belgian clergy abuse victims have received financial compensation amounting to €3 million. Pope Francis's visit to Belgium concludes on Sunday.
Jarosław Szymczyk, the former commander-in-chief of the Polish police, is set to face prosecution next Monday. This will be the first time that he hears charges in the ongoing investigation into the explosion of a grenade launcher in his office in 2022.
A little less than 2 years ago, in December 2022, Jarosław Szymczyk was in his office following a visit to Ukraine. When in Kiev, he received a gift from his fellow police officers, 2 anti-tank grenade launchers. Ukrainian authorities said the weapons were spent, incapable of firing. That theory, however, was quickly put to the test and turned out to be faulty. The explosion caused major damage to several offices inside the building. Thankfully, no one was killed in the incident. According to the former commander-in-chief himself, the weapon fired when he was moving it from one place to another. The prosecutors investigating the case, however, think otherwise. Jarosław Szymczyk is expected to be accused of possessing a weapon, not checking if said weapon was safe despite having the power to do so, and incompetence in evacuating the building following the explosion.
The big-budget biopic Kule, All That Glitter Isn't Gold, is one of the most anticipated films at the 49th Gdynia Polish Film Festival. It tells the story of Poland's celebrated amateur boxer Jerzy Kule as he prepares for the Olympics in Mexico, aiming for another victory after his inspiring win in Tokyo in 1964. Our reporter Karolina Shackland spoke with Kule's son Vladimir, who was instrumental in bringing this movie to life.
I'm here in Gdynia at the 49th Polish Film Festival. We had the chance to talk to Waldemar Kule, the son of the most celebrated Polish gold medalist boxer. He won 2 gold medals at the consecutive Olympics, and now there is a movie based on his life.
This all stems from the dreams I've had since I was a teenager when I admired my father. This is the result of my years-long attempt to commemorate my father. Film seems to be the best way of doing so, the most approachable one for the younger generations. I'd like it to go on into the world, for this story to teach some sort of lesson and to show youth that despite all odds you can achieve your goals. You just can't give up. So this is how it was and how it began.
It's a hotly tipped movie And it is quite incredible to talk about not just the sporting life, but about Kulej's personal life, his struggles in the 60s communist Poland, and about the role of his wife, a strong woman who kept him on a straight and narrow.
The recent reported death of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in an Israeli airstrike has shaken the already volatile situation in the Middle East. Nasrallah had led Hezbollah for over 3 decades, and his death could have major implications for the region's stability as well as the dynamics of the conflict with Israel and Iran's influence. What does it mean for the conflict in the Middle East? Well, joining us today on TVP World to discuss these developments is Daniel Pipes, president of the Middle East Forum. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you.
So can you tell us how significant actually is the death of Hassan Nasrallah for Hezbollah and its operations?
His predecessor was killed by the Israelis 32 years ago, and it didn't make that much difference. Now, that was more an isolated death, and this is part of a larger attack. I don't know. It depends on what the Iranians decide. It depends on the successor to Hassan Nasrallah. This could be a major event in its evolution. It could lead to its decline. It could also be a fairly minor one. I think it's too early to say at this point.
Right. So this still, of course, like you mentioned, very hard to tell what's going to happen going forward. But do you think that this might impact Hezbollah's military or political strategy in Lebanon, at least for this short period of time before someone comes and takes their place?
Definitely the existing leadership of Hezbollah and the leadership in Iran, starting with the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, have major decisions now. Do they attack Israel with everything they have and risk the destruction of Hezbollah? Or do they quietly go away and leave this problem and rebuild? Well, again, I don't know what they're going to do. My inclination is to say I think they will leave this problem and rebuild, because it looks like the destruction that the Israelis have hammered on Hezbollah in the last 2 weeks requires them to go back and rebuild.
Right. And does this affect the whole broader, what's called the axis of resistance and Iran's regional ambitions? Or do you think, like you mentioned, maybe things might just carry on as usual? At least this might send some warning to Iran's leader, correct?
Correct. This is the most aggressive that the Israelis have been versus the Iranian-backed groups, in particular Hamas and Hezbollah. And it must be causing the Iranian leadership in Tehran to think through their strategy, whether it's working or not. So I think there are a lot of questions facing Hezbollah, Hamas, the Iranians. What are they doing next? Are they going to retreat, or are they going to continue to aggress against Israel? As I said before, I think they're going to retreat a bit. I think this was a painful couple of weeks, and in a sense, a painful year. The Iranians probably did not expect Israel to go into Gaza in the way it has. They did not expect the destruction of Hamas that has taken place. I think the Iranians have been surprised by the resolve of the Israelis, who they tend to see as weak. They tend to dismiss as without determination.
All right, so with that in mind, do you think that the further escalation is going to be something of a concern, or do you think things will actually de-escalate now that they are more worried about, well, what's going to happen if things keep heating up?
Let me preface this by saying I have no idea, but if you push me for an answer, I would say I'm inclined to see this de-escalation rather than escalation. I think the Iranians and their allies have suffered some severe losses and are inclined to retract a bit, rethink a bit, and not throw everything they have at Israel.
Right, definitely a very, very complicated situation, and development, of course, is still just rolling in. But from an outside perspective, looking in from the international community, international actor, and the United States, what role can other international partners play in kind of trying to contain the situation? Do you think it's even possible at this point?
I think the best thing that international actors can do is to go to Tehran and tell the Ayatollah Khamenei to stop. He is creating all sorts of problems, not only for the region, but for himself. And it would be wise to cut back on this aggression, this seven-front war with Israel. It's not working. Time to rethink, time to calibrate, time to stop being so murderous.
But do you think that is something that could be done realistically? Do you think that the assassination maybe could be a turning point to start this dialogue, or do you think Iran will still be relatively reluctant to cooperate?
I think the Iranians will be relatively reluctant, but my greater concern is that Western powers will not be going to Tehran and not conveying a kind of message that I suggested, that they will be trying to bridge the differences between Tehran and Jerusalem. I don't think we want to bridge the differences. I think we want to tell the Iranians to stop it. Stop it now and stop it permanently.
That's pretty interesting. Can you tell me why do you think there's this reluctance to, do what you has just mentioned, but instead trying to seek like the alternative of bridging differences?
Oh, there are a lot of reasons. Some of them are commercial. Some of them have to do with views within, especially on the left, among Islamists in Western countries, which are now not insignificant. Some of it has to do with a abiding dislike of Israel and Israelis. So various factors.
Right. And what do you think are some of the possible implications for the Lebanese government and its already fragile political state?
The Lebanese government is not much of a government. Hezbollah is more powerful militarily and economically than the Lebanese government. It's called a state within the state, and that's a good description. So really, the Lebanese government has historically been weak, and given the financial crisis of the past few years, it is weaker than ever. So really, it's a decision for Hezbollah and Hezbollah's masters in Tehran to reach, not the Lebanese government.
And last but not least, do you think Nasrallah's death would affect Hezbollah's relation with other regional actors like Syria, for example?
Well, we're reading about great joy in parts of Syria about the death of Hassan Nasrallah. Hezbollah was actively engaged on the side of the Syrian government, murdering the Syrian people. So the government will be unhappy, but many people in Syria will be happy. Hezbollah had a murderous reign, has had a murderous reign, still there, in Lebanon and to a certain extent in Syria as well. So one hears a surprising number of Muslim voices saying that they're relieved that this very competent and very evil man is now gone.
All right, I do see a lot of very kind of polarizing opinions when it comes to this particular incident. And some people are expressing joy, like you mentioned, and some people are sharing their concerns. What do you think all this polarization is coming from? And why do you think that the views of this incident is so divided?
Well, the basic divide in the Middle East is between the Islamists and the anti-Islamists. It's no longer about Arab nationalism. It's no longer about Israel. It's about Islam. It's about the Iranian version of Islam, and to a lesser extent, the Turkish version of Islam, which are very aggressive. And what you see are three sides, the Iranian, the Turkish, the Saudi-led one, we call it. And although the Saudis are Muslims and ex-Muslims, they're not Islamists at this point. They're not seeking to expand the rule of Islamic law. They're not seeking a caliphate. They're not seeking to undo the existing order. So they are more status quo oriented, whereas the Iranians are revolutionaries. They want to throw over the existing order and change it into an Islamic order, a medieval Islamic order. So that's the great divide in the Middle East and beyond, in other regions where Muslims are a majority.
Right. And like you mentioned earlier, of course, this information, a lot of it's still fresh and a lot of information still rolling out. So we'll have to see what happens in the next few days. Meanwhile, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TV World.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. And thank you for watching this edition of World News Tonight. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.